You'll be mine.
Hope it's not. Hope it's not too late. I hope it's not too late.
Good, you'll be mine. You'll be mine. Oh. 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 Good, you'll be mine. Good, you'll be mine. You'll be mine. Oh. Good, you'll be mine. You'll be mine. Oh. Good, you'll be mine. You'll be mine. Oh.
It's not too late.
You'll be mine.
Hope it's not. Hope it's not too late.
You'll be mine.
Hope it's not. I hope it's not too late.
Is this thing on? Is it on? Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'll give you a couple seconds to find some seats. If you are searching for a seat, there's some plush little seats over here. There's a seat up here, seat over here. There's a couch thing over here that you're welcome to. I'm hoping we have enough chairs. For reference, I see a lot of new faces. We have never had this many people who RSVP'd actually show up. It's new for us. So thank you for coming, and thanks for working with us while we're like figuring out food and seating and all of that jazz. This many people rocks. Definitely keep coming, okay? Awesome. Well, welcome. I'm going to be your guide for tonight, get things started. My name is Cass, in case you don't know me. There's a couple organizers floating around. CJ up here, Marlena somewhere in the back there, and then Cheddar in the back as well. If you need anything, grab one of us. Also, other people around that know things, so find someone. But yeah, welcome. This is DenverScript. A couple of things to get out of the way before we dig in. We do have a code of conduct. You can check it out on the DenverScript website. We are dedicated to providing a harassment-free community for everyone. So any participants who violate the code of conduct rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the community at the discretion of the organizers. We're always going to communicate, though. It's not going to be a surprise. If you're being harassed or notice that someone else is being harassed or have any other concerns, please just contact one of us. You can find one of us and tell us in person. You can send us an email, write us an anonymous note, whatever you would like, but try to communicate to us and we will do what we can to rectify the situation. The ground rules are pretty straightforward. Be kind. We ask that you don't talk over the organizers or the speakers. Obviously, if you've got something that you need to talk about or you're just finishing up a conversation, you can do that quietly, wrap it up really quickly, or we have this conference room right here. You're welcome to just step in there and continue the conversation. But I also don't want you to miss any of the content. So maybe say, hey, let's meet up after the meetup. Whatever works, though. And then during QA, the organizers will be running around. Do we have the spatula of speaking? We don't. Oh. We have a mic. We usually have the spatula of speaking, but either way, we will bring it to you. We ask that you ask constructive questions and don't try to prove a point or gotcha the speaker. The speakers put a lot of work in, and if there's something you disagree with, I would always recommend opening a discourse with them, kindly, openly, mainly just get a feel for where they're coming from as well. So yeah. Tonight, we've got two sponsors. First of all, Code Talent. This is the lovely space that you are in, the technical talent agency. I like the joke about saying that these recruiters know the difference between Java and JavaScript. I think that's clever, and I think it's also true. So if you need help finding a gig, or you've got gigs and want Code to help you find people for those gigs, contact them. Ooh, yes, right there. And then sponsoring the food tonight is jam.dev. I encourage you to check them out. Really cool, beautiful website, by the way, and adorable little logo. So thank you to jam.dev for food tonight. We're always looking for sponsors. There's a lot that goes into this. We buy name tags, we buy food, we sometimes supply drinks, we've got streaming equipment to keep track of. If your company is looking to get their name out and want to do that through some sponsorships, send us an email. We would love it. And then we're always looking for speakers. And I'm actually going to do a little bit of an additional plug after this. But submit your talk. For those of you who know me or have seen me around or have been to this meetup before, you know that I'm going to ask that you seriously consider submitting a talk. It's not that we're hurting for talks, but I personally believe that as we build up the community in Denver, we can get people out into the whole country. It only improves our community here. It only makes things better for us. So talk with us at DenverScript and then build up your chops and go talk at a conference and do something big. So on that note, I want to talk to you briefly about conferences coming up before I hand things over to our first speaker. Open Source Summit. I want to bring this up in particular because look, it's in Denver. So if you're, on the fence about conferences, maybe nudge your employer or maybe put some money aside to get a ticket. Networking is probably the best way to get a job if you're hunting. So I encourage you to look into conferences. This one's here. Submit a talk. You can find other conferences at various websites. I like to look through comps.tech. They've got so many coming up. I'm just going to scroll through these. It's tons. There's others on other sites, but take a look at these, find something that you might want to go to. Some of them are online. And if you can't afford a ticket, especially for these online conferences, sometimes if you email the organizers, they'll give you a free ticket. Just saying. And then lastly, this is not a conference, but I don't see a lot of your faces at React Denver when I go. And I wonder why. And I'm guessing it's because you might not know that it exists. React Denver is a meetup. Their website is reactdenver.com. I encourage you to check it out. They meet up somewhere downtown. I forget the location, but they're pretty rad. So,
Next to Union Station.
yeah, thank you. Right next to Union Station. So you could take a train and walk. Pretty rad. So check that out if you haven't. All right, y'all. We're not going to do news tonight. There's 3 months of news that we would have to catch up on. That's a little much. So I encourage you to look up the JavaScript news if you need. I would like to hand it over to our very first speaker of the night. Let's give him a warm welcome. Oh, okay, CJ.
Okay, I didn't prepare any slides, but what I did do is build an app. So I I need Cass for this. Let's see, is it set up? Yeah, okay, it's ready to go. So basically what Cass can do is she can search the web for an image. Give me just a random word. I heard owls, so let's see a picture of an owl. And I just taught her how to use the app like 5 minutes ago, so. Hey, well, I'm using object cover with CSS. Add another, give me another word. Corn? Corgi. Let's see a corgi. Oh yeah, so the idea is as I'm talking, she will think of things, find images, and then show them behind me. I have no idea what she's gonna be showing me. It should be pretty entertaining. Yeah, cool. Okay, so. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. My name is CJ. As Cass mentioned, I'm a co-organizer here. But today, I am going to tell you the story of how doing absolutely nothing at my first internship set me up for the rest of my career. And I just remember, can we make sure the stream can see me?
Well, you moved.
Yeah, okay, great. Stream's good. Okay. So it was the summer after my sophomore year of college. I was getting a computer science degree, and I got an internship as a system administrator intern at a company. Yeah, so I got to go work there. And this story is going to sort of be made up of life lessons. Maybe I'll throw them in here and there. The first one, and the first life lesson I have, is avoid long commutes, because my commute to this job was an hour long. And as I will talk about, I had nothing to do there. So I was in this purgatory of wake up at 6 a.m., drive for an hour, do nothing at a computer, maybe browse Reddit, and then commute an hour back home. Eventually I started going in at like 10 a.m. and then leaving at like 3 p.m., but still an hour commute is not good. And over my career, my commute gradually got better and better. My next internship after that, my commute was 5 minutes. I found an apartment right next to the building I was working in. And then my job after that, it was like a 20-minute reverse commute, no traffic. And then my commute after that was the best one ever. It was a 15-minute walk. And those are the best kind of commutes, because you can just walk and think, and work is right there. I also skateboard, so I could like cut the time in half if I needed to. But yeah, first life lesson: avoid long commutes. Who here has? I mean, these days we're all remote, but who here has a long commute still? What's the longest commute? What do you guys have? Hour 20. Oh, I hope it's worth it. An hour? Yeah. So yeah, avoid long commutes. Okay, but the job that I was working, and obviously I know the situation depends, obviously, but yeah, exactly. Sometimes you have to. But the job I got hired for, they were a company that created software for food banks and homeless shelters. So the software let them track like their food inventory, and they could keep track of the people going in and out of the shelters and the food banks. To keep track of who they're giving stuff to. And so that's what they did. And I was hired as a system administrator intern. And I realized that there are there's not a lot of young faces in the audience, but some people have never heard the term system administrator. These days, it's all kind of roped up into DevOps. But before a lot of automation, there used to be the role of system administrator, and essentially you just manage servers. And my particular job was to help them upgrade their websites. So they I forgot there's stuff happening behind me. But yeah, they were upgrading their databases for one. So they were migrating from MySQL to Postgres. And so part of the upgrade process was to run some scripts that transferred all of the data. And then they were upgrading the site itself. And if I remember correctly, it was almost like a Joomla-based site. So Joomla is like a content management system, but I think it was like heavily customized after that. So those were the sites, and then my job was to help them upgrade them. But as I mentioned, I rarely had anything to do. I would basically show up, I would ask, what can I do, what can I be working on? But they just didn't have anything for me. And I remember, I'll tell you a story about Bob, we'll call him, to protect the innocent. But I remember it was probably my first week there, and they had given me like a small task, and I needed some help. So I knew that Bob could try and help. So I went over to his desk and I was like, hey, Bob, I'm trying to do this thing. Can you help me out? And I remember he opened up a Word document that was just filled with Linux commands of all different kinds. And so what I found is that Bob actually didn't really know his way around a Linux terminal. He kind of just remembered which of these commands he could copy paste, and they worked. They're almost like magic incantations, just like copy paste, it does the thing. He didn't really get what it was for. So yeah, that was my first experience of seeing like, oh, maybe the people here don't exactly know what they're doing. But so that was that. And because I was sitting there doing nothing, I wanted to do something. And I remember it was probably maybe the second week I was there, they smacked a 100-page manual onto my desk and said, this is how we upgrade websites. It's all the steps that you take. You copy this directory, you upload this, you run this script to transfer data. So it's basically just a long list of steps to actually upgrade websites. And I remember that I had just taken a systems administration course, or not a system, operating systems course. And so I had just learned about Bash and scripting. And so that was like really fresh on the brain. And so I remember looking through the manual and just thinking, this could be automated. I could automate this. And so I started doing a little bit of research to decide if I wanted to, and wanted to try to automate it. And I did because I had nothing else to do. And I remember I could have asked, hey, is it cool if I automate this thing? But I also didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't know if I'd actually be able to do it. I really don't know the reason why, but I didn't ask. I was just like, well, you're not asking me to do anything anyway, so I'm going to make work for myself. And so I set out to automate this manual upgrade process. Like I mentioned, it was a Joomla site, and so there are various aspects of the upgrade where you would have to change various settings. And I remember that after the Joomla upgrade, you'd log into the Joomla dashboard, and then there'd be a few more things that you would fill out that finished the upgrade. But I had to figure out how can we automate all of that. And so I was very early in my career. I didn't even know what a templating language was, and so I kind of invented my own templating language. Essentially, I figured out the files that this Joomla UI was editing, and then I put inside those files %%, all caps, %% of the variable that I'd like to replace it with. And then I learned about this cool Linux command called sed, which is basically like regex, but it allows you to replace things inside of a file. Yeah, so it's like use regex, but then point it at files. So yeah, I learned a bunch of stuff just trying to build this tool. Yeah, so essentially, you could run this script from the command line. It would ask you a few questions, like, what's the site that you're upgrading? It would ask you the same questions that the UI would show you, and all of that. And then when you hit go, literally the whole site upgraded in like 10 seconds. And that was awesome. But I remember there was one more thing I needed to figure out, because part of the database upgrade process, I can't remember exactly if they used to go into like pgadmin or something to do something manually, but there was one more piece that I wanted to automate. I was like, all right, I'm going to learn some SQL. I'm going to figure out how to write the code to upgrade this database. And so I remember I was working on like just a local copy of the database, so if I did anything wrong, it wouldn't mess anything up. And I remember figuring out what I needed, and then I just wasn't sure because I was new. I'd never written any SQL before, and so I asked my boss if he could validate it or look at it to see if I was doing it right, and or if he could find somebody that could. I remember he went and he asked the lead programmer. And so I was sitting at my desk, and the lead programmer walked over, and I was like, oh, hey, I wrote this SQL script. I don't know if I'm doing it right. can you help me out? Am I messing anything up? And I remember he kind of just stood there. He's like, looks good to me, and he just walked away. So to me, that was kind of a life lesson of just like, I don't know, I can do this. Like you when I was in university, I remember thinking of the job of being a software developer or assistant administrator is just like this big thing, and it's just people doing work. And that particular event for like the lead programmer, I remember they used to talk about this guy. He was awesome. So for him to come over and just be like, oh yeah, it's good, and not even have thing to say, that was great. Okay, so all of this to wrap up, I built this tool, and now it's time to show someone. And so I remember I got the team. It was Bob and then my boss, and I was like, all right, I built this tool. Basically, this process that takes us normally a couple of days, now it'll happen in like 10 seconds. And so I spun up the CLI, I answered a few questions, hit enter, loaded up the site, and it worked. It was like, fully upgraded. And I remember the look on Bob's face. So Bob is the one that didn't know like Linux commands. He was befuddled. I don't think he understood these kinds of things were even possible, or like what I even did. Looking back, he also could have been like, oh no, I'm out of a job. But so I remember that. So basically, this idea of making work for myself is really what carried throughout my career. And I guess if I had any advice for people that have interns or people that you're mentoring, is challenge them, right? Find things for them to do to grow and potentially like add value to your company. It's not good for anyone for people to just sit there and do nothing. So that's a piece of advice for anyone in that type of position. But also for me, I learned that I don't like to sit idly. So I want to find jobs, and I want to go work at places where I can always be working and always be doing things. And if I'm not, then I will make work for myself. So almost every job after that, if I had any downtime, I would build tools that would help me work faster, or little project ideas. And I kind of followed the same thing of don't ask, kind of just show. Because if you ask someone, hey, can I build this thing? Hey, I have this idea for a thing. It's very hard to convey that idea, so they might just be like, oh, it's not worth your time. But if you already have the spare time, and you think it'll work, and you put in the work to create the thing, showing someone a working example of something is so much more powerful than just telling an idea of something. So my first job, after college, I remember I worked at a big enterprise, and their intranet had super long URLs. And I remembered, I was like, we need a URL shortener. So in my spare time, I learned ASP.NET. I built a thing and built a URL shortener. And then I showed it to my boss. I'm like, well, this is crazy. And then the whole company started using that URL shortener. And then after that, I worked as an instructor. And anytime I had downtime, I would build tools that helped me with my jobs for like grading student assignments, or assessing students, or assessing other instructors. And then now my job kind of allows me to just build things and then also teach and talk about them. So I make videos for a channel called Syntax, and I also make videos for my own YouTube channel called Coding Garden. And I basically get to build cool tools all the time. So I built tools for helping me read the live chat. For Syntax, I published a video today, and I built like 3 different tools that help me create image assets, and also doing like tools that help with like AI summaries and stuff like that. Hey, that's me. All that one experience kind of just dominoed into me doing things in my spare time, always building. And I took notes that I didn't look at. Let me see if I missed anything, and I'll try to come up with a big grand conclusion so you will actually clap. Okay, so I guess the last thing, the other aspect, I talked about this of like not knowing that like devs are just people. I remember being in university. At this point, I was already 2 years in university, and I just didn't have an idea of like, what does a programmer do? What does a software developer do? And I mean, even at this job, I guess it wasn't a software job, but it was a sysadmin job. But I kind of learned they do nothing. Like they make work for themselves. So that was always just like, it was just this big cloudy thing. But I think what that job taught me is that being a software developer, being a web developer is just another job. It's just people doing a job. It's a particular type of job, and in that, at least for me, that I can also have it as a hobby. Not everyone does or has to, but I think for me that was one of the biggest life learnings is we're all just people trying to do our best. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. I'll give you a few seconds to find some spots. Again, if you need a seat, there's a couple of seats speckled throughout here. We'll give everybody a little bit to find a spot before we dig in. Awesome. Well, that was really fun. Hopefully the images worked out. Great talk, CJ. All right. Next up, I'd love to kick off our next talk by Kyle. Let's give a warm welcome to Kyle, please.
Hello, everyone. Ahoy, mateys. So you might be wondering if you saw the thing for the talk, like, wasn't it supposed to be 28? It was. And then I started putting a timeline together and found many more jobs. And, like, this is actually a pretty conservative number. Like, I also did, I'm not counting, like, when I did a one-day, like, contract kind of thing. Woof, I have had an awful lot of jobs. So, actually, before I start the talk, man, looking out over this crowd, this is kind of something special. In like the low point of the pandemic, when we finally started getting back together, and even when we were doing it online, some nights like DenverScript would have 5 people, and that was a good night. That was like anybody showed up. And when I first started coming to this meetup 12 years ago, I think, it looked a lot like this, and like that started maybe the most exciting part of my whole career. Everybody also complained back then, but everybody there is just looking for a job. How am I ever going to get a job if everybody there is looking for a job? Those were like the first real friends that I made in this community, and like we built things together. We helped each other get jobs. Like, it's a special thing. So please, please, keep coming to this. It's really neat, and thank you so much to Cass, CJ, Chad, Marlena, the whole gang for like bringing this back to life. Round of applause, please. All right, so some quick stats. I've only been laid off one time. It just happened in September. I have been fired, like somebody just gleefully going like, "You are fired. I want you out of here. Clean out your shit." That has happened 8 times. I have quit 14 times, but the most common scenario is that like, we thought this was going to be a bigger thing. Sorry. Yeah, all of these are like something that the federal government has like a piece of paper saying that I worked at this place. So I broke it into eras, and then I'm going to give you some takeaways. All right, so when I was in high school, my work career kind of looked like this. So I started working at scout camp, and I had these color-coded sort of kind of by like, at least how I think of them. So in this case, green is like education-y kinds of stuff, red for retail, and the gray for anything that was kind of like an office job, effectively. All right, so like first real kind of thing where like I had to go to an orientation and like meet my coworkers. That was like I worked at summer camp for the Scouts. My first like what is like instantly recognizable as like a clock in, clock out kind of thing is Hollywood Video. And so I told my 12-year-old today I was going to give this talk, and he said, "What is your first job?" Imagine explaining Hollywood Video to a 12-year-old. Not only does the video part of this not make any sense, but like I got a promotion there at some point to movie director. What a movie director did at Hollywood Video is on Friday and Saturday nights, you'd wear a tuxedo and you would be the recommendation algorithm. I watched every new movie that came out, and I was like 16, and so I had to like catch up on all these classic flicks. I watched like 3 or 4 movies a night. Yeah, on Saturdays I would go like, "Well, what brings you in today?" And they're like, "Oh God, I'm looking for something that's like a mindfuck movie like Fight Club, man." And like also worth mentioning that like this is 1999's movies that are happening there. If you're unfamiliar, 1999 was like peak cinema. Yeah, like you just list out all the movies that came out that year, it's wild. wild. And so like that was actually like one of the coolest first jobs I think you could possibly have. But yeah, anyway, very difficult to explain to my my 12-year-old. Also, I was like, I made $6.20. That's an hour. That's what I made there. It's like, what would that be in today's dollars? It's like $9.50. Like it was just not very much money then either. And so, and then I worked at Sears, and like that was actually a really interesting contrast between those two things that is very similar to how I think of startup life and enterprise life and software, where like my Hollywood video experience was the 10 people that I worked with. Sears was not only like Sears, but it used to be a very big department store, and so like my store had 400 employees, and there was a huge hierarchy there, and like nobody really knew my name exactly, except my boss, Linda. And man, did she enjoy firing me. That was the first time I got fired. And I remember it so vividly when I was like, I walked in and she's like, come into my office. And I was like, what seems to be the trouble, officer? She's like, you're fired. You are done. I'm firing you. You don't work here anymore. And I was like, for what? And she just pulled out this ream of dot matrix paper, which is like the all joined together with the stuff on the sides. And it was a printout of my time card thing. She's like, you have been late almost every day that you've worked here. And I was like, maybe by like a minute or two. And she's like, ahem. November 3rd, 17 minutes late. November 4th, 54 minutes late. And like, just goes through the whole thing. Is like, I get the picture. She's like, I don't think you do. And she like insisted on reading all of it. And that was the first time I got fired. That was also like the first time I did classroom education in this era. So I was in a vocational high school kind of thing. It was actually like the student teaching year from your first 2 years of like an education degree. I did that in my like senior year of high school. I taught 7th grade band for a year. And that was also like a really like good institutional learning thing, because like I loved the teaching. It was exactly what I thought it would be. I was good at it. I really liked doing it. And working for a school blows. Like it's really, really bad. The kinds of like bureaucratic elements of the job, even then, and like they had these like assignments that were like, talk to your mentor teacher about that part of the job. And they'd be like, yeah, I really wish you hadn't asked about that part. Yeah, it's exactly as bad as it looks. And that actually like kind of kept me out of education for a long time, as you'll see. And then I worked at Domino's for a while, and you know what? I didn't hate that job. Driving around, listen to the music you want to listen to. I get to chain smoke, or back then you got to chain smoke. I'm sure some of those pizza boxes were like, Jesus, did you just pull this out of the boiler room? Anyway, that was my work career in high school. So if I'm thinking of a theme, something that I took away from all this, I was actually fascinated by the differences between all of these things, and like all of these count as work, because my dad was a guy who like got a job, he got laid off, and then he got another job, and that was his entire career. And so just the difference that I saw in like summer camp, teaching at a school, working retail, working big retail, delivery, like all these count as work, and they all had the same like paperwork you filled out and stuff. And so all of them were very different, but we call them all the same thing. That was like something that kind of stuck with me. And so this era, I was, the thing that's wild about here, I'll skip to like my weird takeaway from this era. I don't think of any of those as like my job from that time. Like if you had asked me in this time, what do you do for work? I would have said making records, because like I was in audio production school. I was making rock and roll records with my buddies, and like it wasn't always going great, but like I thought of that as like the job that I was doing, and these were things that I was doing to make money. And so like I was a stagehand for a while. I did have another run of like retail jobs. The crisis ID thing was interesting. That was the first time I fell for a scam. Like, the person wasn't trying to scam me. I think she didn't get that it was a scam either, but it was like, no, you sell college kids these cards, and then you're their up level, and you get a portion of all of the cards that they sell. And so I tried to do it, and that was like, I was a web developer the way that everybody was a web developer back then. Is like, I'm a little handy with GeoCities and AngelFire. I'll make a website. And like I had done all this work, and I was hanging out outside grocery stores, and like I didn't make a fucking dollar off of that, but I did have to like sign up for all the shit and like the blue in here is for blue collar work, stuff where like you run out of breath and like sweat and carry stuff, and so like a lot of this stuff was like setting up festivals or building speaker stacks for like super famous artists, like everything that would come to the Seattle equivalent of Pepsi Center or Red Rocks or whatever. I probably worked on that show in some regard. And I was like, I'm in the music business, but like 99% of the job is like, all right, lift that heavy fucking thing out of the truck and carry it all the way over there, and you're gonna have to put it back in 2 hours. But all of those were just jobs that I was doing then. I thought I was making records. And then so I was in Seattle, very expensive place to live, not so very unlike Denver now. It didn't think of itself as an expensive place to live because it hadn't been until then. And I think Denver's actually in kind of the exact same place right now, where Denver's just a cow town in the Midwest. It's like, it's also kind of been like a tech center for 20 years. And like all of the cities change over time. And Seattle was doing that, and that was a really rough place to start your life. And so I moved to Las Vegas with my now wife, and I had kind of given up on all of the music stuff. So like right up front, WSOP, World Series of Poker, I was a video operator, and then the show was over. And so like I'm still on their like list, but they don't have one every month. And so like system services, that was like kind of my last ditch. Like that was an installer. Like you go into a bowling alley and they go, we need new speakers, we need new whatever. And like I'd come out of audio school so I could solder and make cables and wire stuff together. And there was just nothing happening there. And that shit was so early in the morning too. That was like part of my realization there. Oh, I just realized I left a job out. I also worked at the factory that makes the NASCAR windshields. God, I can't believe I left that one out. That was the only time I've ever failed a drug test. And it wasn't me. It was like actually not my fault. I had like just moved out of out of Seattle, and my buddies were hotboxing in the car, and I didn't smoke at all, like actually. And I was just in the car, but like, and that wouldn't be a big deal in most situations, but they did hair tests, which will catch anything. And especially fucked up because everybody I worked there with was like hammered all the fucking time. Because once you pass the drug test, you never have to take it again. Anyway, so I'd kind of given up on that whole thing. I was like, I'm just going to be a boring business guy like my dad. And did a series of like office job kinds of things. They basically all sucked. The only exception was the art bar in there. I did sound for like a bar on the Las Vegas Strip, and that was cool, but I would bring my own gear, and I would stay for the whole show, and I would help people load in, and like it was awesome. I'd do that for like 4 or 5 hours, and I'd make like $25. I still did it for a long time, though. And then the purple stuff on here is where I start doing tech stuff. So Eastridge Group was a staffing agency in Las Vegas, and I would it's funny, I just heard somebody like last week do the like, everybody puts Excel on their resume, but nobody knows how to use it. It's like, you don't know how to use Excel? But like I was the guy. I was like, yeah, I know how to use Excel. And so they'd send me these places, and I was like, we have these massive spreadsheets we have to manage. And I'd try to help them manage them, and then I'd complain about it on LiveJournal. And somebody said, sounds like you should really be using a database, not a spreadsheet. And I'm like, what is a database? And I bought a book from on Microsoft Access, the step-by-step from Barnes & Noble. And it was $40 fucking. I couldn't imagine a book costing $40. And the fine folks at Las Vegas Valley Trucking paid for it. I was like, I am living the fat life now. This like office job shit's actually pretty good. And I got okay at like database kind of stuff. And I did the same sort of stuff at Expedia. And so then, but at the end of all of this, I was depressed as hell, man. Like, these jobs didn't matter. They didn't use anything I was good at. Like, I was checking boxes, and I was like, this isn't life, man. And so in the music years, I moved to Denver, and I started working at Guitar Center. I was like, I can't fake it anymore, man. I got to be around, like, rockers, dude. I got to be around my tribe. And so I got a job over the phone at Guitar Center, and, like, we packed up all our shit and moved, like, a week later. And Guitar Center was the first job I had that I didn't hate. I thought that was just maybe part of jobs. But like from day one, people were like, thank God you're here. Because like I was an audio guy and they really needed one. And I was actually really good at it. And not only did the people I work with value that, the customers valued that. And they didn't give a shit that like, sometimes I'm 10 minutes late. They didn't give a shit that I swear. They didn't give a shit that like I had a mohawk. They didn't care about any of that stuff. They just cared that I was good at the job. And I was like, oh, that's possible? And that really changed everything. And like, it was the perfect job right up until the day it wasn't. And it was like, I can't do this anymore. And I had to go. But like, this whole period in here, like I still think back on like, this is where I learned all this stuff. That iTech Fitness thing, that was the first thing that I like started. So it was a customer at Guitar Center it was a startup. They made like fitness arcades and sold them to YMCAs and stuff. And I was selling them all this gear, and they're like, hey, do you want to install them for us too? I was like, holy shit. So I would spend 5 days a week at the Guitar Center on County Line, like managing the store and selling gear and shit. And then every weekend, I would go to Tennessee or Sacramento or Nashville or wherever to some random YMCA where all these boxes that I had drop shipped there would be waiting. I'd stay up all night hanging them on the thing, and then I'd go back home. And like, I had never bought a plane ticket before. I had certainly never been stranded at an airport before. And then I did. And now I'm not afraid of those things anymore. Like, it sucks, but like, I thought, I don't know, you go to jail or hell or I don't know. And so I was getting a lot of confidence, and I was in a band, and like, I bought a house. I was like making okay money, and like everything was going good. And then it was like, so I was at my music school teaching music full time, and I had a packed schedule. Has anybody here ever taught lessons, like piano lessons, anything like that? A couple folks. I had at one point 55 students. Yeah, that's like a lot. That's like an insane number of individual students. And making great money from it, I bought a house. But I couldn't have had 56 students. And like even maintaining that volume of students, like, because there's churn on it. So that's like 10, 15 new students a week to replace the people who didn't do their free trial or whatever. And so I'm working like 60 hours a week, maybe making $35K. And I was like, okay, is it just this for the rest of my life? Like, because there's no promotion where like they double your salary. It's like everybody I'm working with has been doing this for 30 years also. And it's like, wow, okay. I always thought like, you know, money isn't everything to me. I guess I'm just that kind of guy. And then I like saw what that actually means. Is like trying to have kids and like things break in the house and whatever. Is like, this is too much, man. And so that's when it's like I didn't mind the databases stuff so much. And so I went back to school for technology. Oops, these got turned around. Yeep, beep, 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 beep. There we go. And so then I studied information systems because I wasn't smart enough to be a programmer. And then I got an information systems job at Pearson, and I said, what information would you like me to system? And they said, no, psych, we need you to do some programming. I was like, oh, you don't want me to program anything. And they said, well, do you want the job or not? And one of the things I learned in music is the answer is always yes. Do you teach harmonica lessons? I will next week. And so I faked it, and I faked it, and I faked it, and I faked it until I wasn't really faking it anymore. And one of the things that I remember vividly about this era is this overlap, where like as I'm getting started with this was also like my peak earning on all of this stuff. Like that Digital Revolution marketing job, I was a director there. I had employees. Like it wasn't full-time work. It was like 10 hours a week maybe, but it was like for music industry, like insanely good pay for that. Those music students that I had all that time, like I never stopped liking that job. And so as I was ramping up in tech, I still was doing an awful lot, like for 2 years here, where I was really kind of doing all of that. And then coming out of that, I guess one of my takeaways from the early tech years is like so much of it was learning, and I was like, this is exciting, and this technology, and oh my God, computers are so cool. And the reason that I left Pearson is I had spent like a year and a half making a product, like leading a team and doing a neat thing. And even like as I was studying business and stuff at the time also, and I was like, oh, I can get all these different parts of the organization to work together and we can make this cool product. And we did, and it died in the bureaucracy. Like, it was like, oh, sorry, nobody can agree how the like costs will be apportioned on this. And so, yeah, it's just gonna sit on the shelf for right now. And I was like, that is the best I have to offer. Like, there's no other wallet sitting around with my other best sitting in it. Fuck this, man. And then the thing that got me out of that was I had just started doing talks. I think it wasn't it was DenverScript, might have been my first or second talk. And it was at Galvanize in the Platt building, and it was on how web apps work. And there was a guy in the audience, Graham McBain, thank you forever, Graham, who came up to me afterward and said, hey, that was pretty good. Would you like to do it for money? And recruited me for Galvanize. And that was like the first thing as a technologist I'd worked in there was like a startup and had startup energy. And was a lot like Guitar Center, where they're like, no, do all the weird shit that you do. Yeah, that helps. And thought that I was like smart and that I should be in charge of things and that I should make decisions. And that's where I met a lot of you. And that's when I got involved with Develop Denver, which was an organization that kind of like connected different meetups. And we had a conference that we did every year. A lot of you worked for it or went to it. And then I went to Flatiron School after Galvanize and went through the exact same thing in the exact same order with the exact same result. Not a lot of code schools out there anymore. Like, I think I also got something really important out of this era. And it was like, that was a passion. So like Guitar Center was, wow, people here think that I'm valuable. And that was, 2016 was the start of like, I care about something. I want to make this good. I want to make this as good as anyone has ever made something before. And I was really driven by a lot of passion then. And like, a lot of you had a front row seat for like exactly how that went. And like, since I'm standing here right now instead of in my like yacht made of boot camps, like it didn't work out super well. But I really don't regret any of that. And I'm still trying to, like, even if it's not the same thing, I'm trying to get back to that energy. Because what I learned from all of that is, like, that was the hardest I've ever worked in my life. But dude, it, like, gives back also. That you're seeing results and that, like, you guys are getting jobs and, like, the shit was working. Like, that also energizes you. And it's like, whoa, work isn't just a drain. It's not just, do I have energy from that? It's like, am I going to get energy from this also? And so that brings me into the current era, where it looks an awful lot like it did when I was, like, at the Art Institute and just doing this and doing that and doing this. And, like, all of this stuff, like, it feels a lot, it looks like a lot. It kind of is. But really, I think of it as, like, options. So Seek Education's my company. And so I do consulting, I do workshops, I do one-on-one lessons. And I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Denver. And so, like, it's like 5 hours a week maybe, but I've been doing it for years. Pluralsight, I do trainings with them fairly often, and they connected me with Ford. I spent 9 months training Ford engineers. I did the same thing with Liberty Mutual. And then, like, I've done some just straight up engineering and team lead stuff with Sunrun, and I just signed a contract last night to do some with a local company, Urban Sky, also. And a lot of this is, like, it doesn't feel like a bunch of different jobs to me. It all feels like the same thing. Like, there's this thing that I'm pursuing that I was trying to pursue at Galvanize and what I was trying to pursue at Flatiron, and it just looks like this now. But it does feel like this kind of deep part that is trying to get enough fuel to keep going, and the fuel is money. And so, like, I think of, like, if you're on a road trip or something like that, the fueling up the car is not the point of the trip, but if you don't do it, you don't get there. Money is a lot like that. Like, you have to pay attention to it. There needs to be enough coming in that you can keep going to wherever you want to go to, and you get to pick where that is. But, like, so that's a lot of what's happening now is, like, how can I do stuff I don't hate that brings enough fuel in to keep the trip going? All right, so my takeaways from all of this is that you're not any one thing. So I've done classroom teaching, I do engineering, and, like, boy, do I hate the, like, are you a front-end engineer or a back-end engineer? I make products, I solve problems. And then, like, but I'm also a musician. I'm still a musician. I still like retail. Like, all of these things work together to make you uniquely valuable at wherever you're working. My next takeaway is that everything makes you better at everything else. Honestly, of the 40 jobs, they have more in common than they don't. Like, the interpersonal relationships, they might be more brusque. The language that people use in a factory, rough. Or it might be, like, very bureaucratic and stilted, but it's still on one spectrum. And then, like, the skills on, like, is it done yet? Can we ship it? Do we know enough to start? All of those things, they're the same everywhere. And when you've seen them in a lot of different contexts, you notice things that you don't otherwise. My third takeaway is there are worse things than getting fired. I've noticed this trend in tech especially, and it's weird that it's in tech way more than any other field, where people will, they'll sell out their ethics, they will stay in jobs they hate, they will do almost anything to avoid having to look for another job. And, like, yo, I've been looking for a job for months. It's rough out there, like, it sucks. But I would do 20 code challenges a day rather than, like, spend another minute at, like, a place that's doing fucked up stuff. This is your life, man. And, like, that's really my last takeaway on this, is that when we talk about work-life balance, I know this is probably a little controversial. Like, it's like they're two different things that are on a scale. But when I zoom all the way out on like the whole timeline and I think about what my life was like in all of these different things, the work wasn't a trivial part of that. That was like, those are the people that I'm hanging out with now. That's kind of like where my special interests are falling. That's what I'm frustrated about. That is your life. And there's other things also, but I think that there's a really popular idea that you can do something fucking stupid as long as it like pays for this other half of your life that you actually enjoy. And I kind of don't think that's possible. Maybe it is for you. I certainly have not found that to be the case for me. All this stuff works together. And so, I don't know, you don't have to love every minute at every job you have. I have hated times at every single one of those 40 jobs. And I've also loved other ones too, because there's something that you can like about everything. Even like you're working at Chipotle or something. I don't know, like you've been to Chipotle before. It's kind of nice when they're friendly and you get your thing and it's, oh man, I got a really good burrito. And it's a little shitty when it doesn't happen. And so if you can think like, oh, I'm giving that person a good burrito, that's a thing that you can get excited about. And even if it's not the burritos, at least like I get to work with my buddies, and everybody at every job can be your buddy. And like, if that culture, if they don't have a buddy culture, you can make it also. Anyway, I've talked for a long time. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Let's do a quick break, like 3 minutes this time. I want to give you some networking time at the end, so, you know, recycle your cans, grab some salad, whatever you need. I'll see you in 3. y'all. Let's get moving on to the next talk. I'll give you a little time to settle into chairs. I know some people are still using the bathroom. That's fine. Go for it. But for the rest of us, let's find our spots. All right. While everyone's settling in, our final talk for the night is coming up. Thank you. Woo! Thank you. We're about to have our last talk of the night, but I want to get it on your radar that I have a bit of an assignment for you that I'm going to tell you at the end. So stay tuned for the very end. And as usual, if for those of you who have been here and for those of you who have not, we'll have a little bit of time right at the end to catch up with any final networking while we clean up. And yeah, so stay tuned for my assignment. For now, let's give a warm welcome to our final talk of the night. Our speaker is Scott.
Thank you. So I haven't done this talk before, but this is just a story, something that's happened in my life, and I told it to our producer over at Syntax a month ago, and he was like, "You should start telling people about this." So this conference talk almost killed me. It's literal; it almost killed me. So yeah, let's see. All right, so back in 2018. I flew to Romania to speak at a conference. It was like a 2-day trek. I had 3 layovers. Each one had like a 6-hour in between. I was like beat. And I had a broken tailbone the whole time. So I spent that whole time, I didn't know it, but by the end of the flight I knew it, that I had a broken tailbone. And I get off the plane in Romania and I have strep throat. And it was like 2 a.m. I couldn't do anything about it. So I had to get some antibiotics, whatever. I go to the conference that I'm speaking at, and this is the stage I got to speak at. It was a smaller audience than what's in here. So I did all that travel with strep throat and whatever to speak for like 50 people in a tiny little room. And after that, because the antibiotics they gave me weren't great, I ended up getting strep throat 4 more times immediately after. And that was not the worst conference experience I've ever had. Because 2 weeks before that, literally 2 weeks before that, I got my first major speaking gig, and I got a bacterial infection in my hand, and I literally almost died like crazy. So this is that story. So, I've been doing YouTube since 2012, but I'd never really done any conference talks, and I certainly was like not a public speaker by any means. In fact, for maybe the first 2-3 years, even like before I got this plaque, or when I got this plaque, I didn't even show my face on camera. I was just like talking into a microphone and coding, and that worked for me, right? But I wanted to branch out. I wanted to put myself on camera a little bit. I started doing that. And people responded pretty negatively towards that. I got a lot of mean comments. I had somebody who was dedicated to emailing me like once a week just to call me names. Like, I don't know, like, serious, like at my actual email, not even leaving a YouTube comment. What did I do? Yeah. So, yeah, that was wild. But either way, I just practiced it, right? Even though it wasn't good, I was getting, bad feedback, whatever. But you get used to doing these things, right? You get the reps in. But again, because of that, I never saw myself speaking on stage or even doing anything like what I'm doing today, telling a story like this. And, 2017, I started the Syntax podcast with Wes. And Wes was Wes Boss. He's a very practiced speaker. He had been public speaking for a long time. And because of that, he got a ton of gigs tossed his way. Like, I remember it was 2017, and he was like, well, let me see what conferences I've been invited to this year. And it's like a scroll of all sorts of crazy stuff, like everywhere. And he's like, well, if you want to get into speaking, you can take some of the ones I can't go to. All right, I'll take some of these. That's actually, the Romania one was also one of these. But So I was encouraged. He was like, yeah, seriously, pick from these. And one that stood out to me was Zeit Day. And I don't know if this might seem weird to people who are newer in the industry, but Vercel used to be Zeit back in 2017, 2018. So this was Vercel's main conference of the year. It was Zeit Day. And I took that. I thought that's going to be a great conference to speak at. And then a couple months go by. I'm like, yeah, I got a conference to speak at. I got to start prepping my talk. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then my wife's like, well, what's the venue like? I'm like, let's go see the website. That's the venue. I was like, oh, no. I'm not prepared to speak at a big stage like that. That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting a meetup, especially because Zeit at that time, they hadn't done a conference of this stage. They were like speaking in like kind of smaller gatherings, and that's what I thought I was signing up for. But it's not. So I had to prep my talk, and I wrote my talk, and I decided, you know what? If I'm going to be speaking on stage like this, I'm going to have to really run this thing. So I ran it. The talk was about how I learn things quickly because I had already released like 2,000 YouTube videos by that time. I'd released a lot of stuff. So it was like, how do I learn so much? Well, here's how I do it, right? I thought that was an interesting idea for a talk. And also, it was easy to speak on something I really liked. So I gave the talk for my wife and to my dogs, of which very critical feedback. I got a lot of feedback, and I recorded myself doing it. Just like nonstop put in reps. And then the first time I gave the talk was at React Denver. The talk was called Too Fast, Too Furious. It was about learning things too fast. And this was like 6 years? I think it was 2018. But that was the very first time I gave this talk. And I believe that, everybody know what building that is? Turing, yeah, okay, yes. And that might have been even the first time I went to that meetup. Funny story, I couldn't go to those meetups very much after that because they had hard chairs, and with my broken tailbone, I literally could not sit down, so I had to like stand there in the back. But the talk, it went okay, right? It didn't go great. You can see the slides look kind of funky. They might not look funky to you, but none of my fonts loaded, so the font, like it was like a kind of a, one of those things where like, why are my fonts loading? And then that, sets you up on a disaster. I was even getting texts in the middle of the talk from my dad. I did not realize that this talk was being live streamed, and my dad's texting me, slow down, you're talking too fast. Are you nervous? Like, slow down. I'm like, see these come in. I'm like, God, why is it? I had my phone right here too. Yeah. I don't think he thought I don't know if he thought I was going to see them and like inspire me or something. But yeah, so I gave the talk, and it was a good practice run. It also taught me a lot about, specifically what works and what didn't. I was nervous, but like it really taught me like, all right, these things work. These jokes work. These jokes don't work. This pacing works. This is bad. Also, fix your fonts. So here comes the talk. I head to San Francisco. That's me getting off the plane and going to San Francisco. That's actually right before the conference. And this is my first time going to San Francisco since I had gotten turned down for a job at Google. I did a 3-part interview. One of those was an 8-hour interview that I had to give an actual presentation to Google staff as a part of that. And then I got an email like 2 months later that was like, you didn't get the job. That's it. No feedback. So I was like, all right, I'm back in San Francisco, but this time I was invited. Even though it was Wes Boss's invitation, I was still invited. Also, you can't see it because this image is kind of blurry, but for some reason, they put me second to last. I thought, maybe they thought I was Wes still, but they put me second to last. I was going after Andrew Clark, and in this talk, he was introducing React Suspense. Like, that was the introduction to it. That was the first time. So it's like, what are they doing? What do they think I'm talking about here? So, a lot of pressure, right? But I gotta say, I crushed the talk. I was way more confident. I had no missteps or whatever. Yeah, that's me on stage, but there's my wife watching it on TV. It was on YouTube. That was pretty cool. And I gotta say, like, after experiencing the whole, like, nerves of everything and several months of build-up and all this stuff, the talk being on stage was, like, really not that crazy. Because I had ran it, I maybe ran it like 10 times that day already. I just ran it and ran to the ground. I had the Britney mic and everything. I was like, it was easy, right? I didn't have to think about too much. And that was cool. It was a really interesting thing. I got to meet a lot of people that I had never met before. And overall, incredible experience, right? But after the talk, I went to my buddy's place. And we were having a drink and catching up. And I noticed my thumb, it's just starting to ache a little bit. Like, ooh, what's going on here? Nothing crazy. You got a hangnail or something, right? I go to bed. I wake up, maybe like 2 in the morning. My thumb's like double the size. It's massive, and it's throbbing. And I'm like, holy shit, what's going on? So I'm like doing everything I can. I'm running underwater, trying to relieve some of that pain. No. Go back to sleep. Wakes me up at 4 a.m., way worse. Way worse. And same thing. Doing anything I can possibly do to decrease the swelling or whatever the fuck I did to my thumb. I had no idea. I was just like, what is this? Oh, no, this is an empty slide. I put these slides together while I was sitting there, so I didn't have a photo for this one. Also, I did have a photo of my nasty-ass thumb, but I wanted to save you all from that. So I wake up the next morning. I'm getting packed. I had an early flight, like super early, so it's like 6 a.m. I woke up. I'm getting all my stuff ready, and I see this, like, red streak going up my arm. Like, my thumb is bright red, and it's just like this red streak going up my arm. Yeah. And I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. I sent a picture to my wife, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And she said, call the doctor, obviously. So I'd already called my Uber because I was going to be late. I'm in the Uber. The doctor finally picks up, and I describe what's going on. He's like, well, it's nothing good, so you better get your ass to the emergency room right now. And, do not get on that airplane. I remember him very distinctly saying, whatever you do, don't get on the airplane. And I was in a cab. I was headed to the airport. And so I'm like, what? And I go to the Uber driver. I'm like, hey, you got to take me to the ER. And he's like, nope, not gonna. I'm going to take you to the airport because that's where you said you were going. And at that point, I straight up pass out. I passed out. I just knocked over completely. And freaked the other guy out I was in the Uber with. The guy that didn't know this guy. He was probably like, what the hell is going on? This guy, he's asked to go to the ER and then he passes out. Do not know this guy. No idea who he is to this day, but he's from Chicago. He was super nice. He just started, he asked me questions. He's fanning me. He's giving me water. He's like actually helping me out. And it really helped. But I'm panicking. I'm texting my wife at this point. I woke up. I'm like super out of it. Like, holy shit, I just passed out. I'm freaking out over here. Uber driver drops me off at the airport. Like, good luck. All right, peace out. All right, thanks, man. I had to call another Uber and take me to an ER, which, like, of course, I don't know. I'm in San Francisco. No idea where to go. I get to the ER. I show them what's going on. They're, like, rushing me back, which, you go to ER, and they're like, all right, we'll see you in 2 hours. They were like, no, come back right now. And jam me full of antibiotics as fast as possible. And it turns out I had something called lymphangitis where I had an infection. It got into my blood, which got into my lymph system. And they told me like 48 hours or less, man. And which I don't, I have no idea. That seems reasonable considering the type of infection it was. But shit, 48 hours? Or like, I was like maybe this close to getting on the plane anyways, which probably would have been a bad idea. That was like really crazy to me. And honestly, I don't think I've ever gotten over the trauma of that experience, of how like intensely scary that all was. But they pumped me full of antibiotics. I just said I got to watch a hockey game. It was the Penguins versus the Capitals, game 2 of the playoffs. I was just hanging out, and while I'm there, I got a message that my flight was delayed. And I made my original flight. And so I made my original flight. It was like, it moved to like 6 a.m. So I was there, or 6 p.m. So shit, we're all worked out, right? So yeah, I flew home and everything was all right. And then obviously 2 weeks later, the whole Romania shit happened. But it's crazy to know that, like, man, before that experience, the scariest thing in the world to me would have been standing. Actually, I think I have more pictures. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the scariest thing in the whole world to me would have been standing on that stage and doing something like this, right? Like if I would have seen this photo of me, I would have been like, what are you doing? But after that experience, it was like, well, that wasn't. The talk was the least scary thing, the least intense thing, the least frightening thing that I had done in 24 hours, and just the intensity of that other experience completely shifted how I view anything, right? Like signing up for something like this or signing up for something like this. And it really taught me a lot about how these things that we like hold inside as being terrifying or just nerve-wracking experiences, putting ourselves out there, telling stories or speaking on stage or even signing up to speak at DenverScript. Like signing up to speak here in 2018 would have freaked me out. And now it's like, this stuff is easy comparatively to things in life that are actually hard. And so like, I do want to just really impart on you that like, yeah, like look at this crowd. This was in Amsterdam last year at a JS Nation, really cool conference. But yeah, I'm pretty cool coming into conferences recently, but when I came into that, I was like, wait, how far back does this go? That's a second screen. That's like a whole nother screen. And that talk went great too. So at the end of the day, I just think about now, anytime I sign up or I want to do anything, it's this stuff is relatively easy compared to things in life that are actually hard. And if you have something like this, whether it's, starting a YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok, or getting up and speaking or whatever, man, do it sooner than later, because it's way easier than you expect. And there's so many things in life that are harder than this. So, yeah, that's all I got for you today. That's the whole story. But yeah, a pretty incredible, odd experience in my life, and thought it might just be a little interesting story for you. So thank you so much.
Incredible, thank you. That little call to action at the end goes along with my assignment for you. So I'm going to ask that you spend a little bit of time, sometime over the next week, crafting your own stories. And it doesn't have to be something as long as the stories you've heard tonight, but maybe think about something that you could use in an interview coming up. A story about a conflict or a project or a time you failed or a time you succeeded. Give it a beginning, a middle, and an end. Also think about stories that you can take to networking events in the future. Maybe you want to go to Develop Happy Hour in a couple weeks or a week. I don't know. Look at the calendar. Think of the stories that you could share there, either to make friends or to find a new gig or to get somebody else a gig. And then also, if you'd like, think about some stories that you'd like to share here. I'm sure we'll do this again in the future, and we'd love to have one of you up on stage giving your talk. So go to the website if you've got one. Submit it, even if it's not just a dev story, even if it's a technical topic. Submit it here.
Yes, and the details for next month's meetup are up. If you want to read that real quick.
All right. We've got Hot.js, real-time multiplayer live view web framework with React Native and TF Lite. I've never read that before, so. Two separate. Oh, okay, cool. 2 separate talks.
February 25th, we'd love to see you again. Please RSVP. We're going to start packing up. If you could, take the chair that you were sitting in and we'll put it on the rack. That'll help us get cleaned up quickly. We can hang out here probably till like 8:10, 8:15, so feel free to network, talk to people. Thank you for coming. Anything else?
Woo, that's it. Thanks, y'all.